On this week's episode, I'm joined by Suresh Nampuri. Suresh is a university lecturer, a writer, director, a bit of a mad scientist, and having spent time in places like India, South Africa, and Germany, he's now called Portugal his home for the last 5 years. We discuss, amongst other things, food in Portugal, language, Portuguese punctuality, and the type of space and time you are given only in Portugal. Welcome back, or welcome to another episode of Portugal, The Simple Life, and I'm delighted to be joined by Suresh Nampuri. Suresh, how are you? And welcome to the podcast.
Hi Dylan, lovely to be here. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Are you well? How are you?
Excited. It's a Monday, it's stormy, and therefore it's a brilliant day to work.
Is it stormy in Lisbon today?
Slightly stormy, yeah. There are storm clouds on the horizon, little bunch of cumulus clouds looking menacing. It's perfect. It's Wuthering Heights weather. I love working with this.
Lisbon gets chaotic when it rains. It's almost like it's acid rain or something. People forget how to live.
To actually be late to meetings.
Exactly. Suresh, maybe you can start off by telling us a little bit about you.
All right. So, well, you already know my name. I'm actually a string theorist at the Instituto Superior Técnico here in Lisbon. I also happen to have a theatre company called Joy International Theatre. So I originally started off training as an actor. And then when I finished my training and I was going to do stuff with theater, I realized I wanted to solve other puzzles. I got into acting because I was interested in human beings and puzzles about human beings. And then I said I wanted other puzzles for some reason. And then I decided I would switch to physics. And that's how I started doing string theory, and studied black holes. So I study black holes at the moment there. But now, once I'd finished, got my PhD in string theory, I said, oh, good, now I can mix and match both things, which is why now I study puzzles with human beings in in my theater company, and black holes in string theory. So that's what I do. I've been in Lisbon for about half a decade now, more or less, for about half a decade right now. It feels like home, and I intend to settle down and not leave.
You've traveled the world, though. I mean, I remember when you and I met for lunch in Lisbon. You've been in Germany, you've been in the UK, you've been in South Africa, you've been in quite a few places.
That is right. So my PhD advisor was in fact in Jussieu in Paris. Then I went up to Germany, where I spent where I was in Munich actually, and where my closest friends are at the moment. And so one of the things and then of course I went to South Africa, and one of the things I did was do theater in all these places. And that has been enormously enriching, partly because you get trained and then you go out and then you do the same story, especially if you're working in the English language, it's my native language. You can do the same stories with people from different cultures, speaking the same language apparently, but they speak different languages. For example, in South Africa, the very way you say, the Afrikaans way of saying yes completely changes the cadence and the intonation. On the other hand, for example, if you ask a French actor to say yes, he's in his mind is saying oui, he's saying yes, which is a totally different attitude. And so what I've been essentially enjoying is how the English language becomes this form of expression for emotions that are completely, totally singular and unique in all these countries and various continents. So at this point of time, also it has changed my accent. So my accent is now totally sprawled out. I occasionally say yes in the Afrikaans way sometimes, or even a yebo when I feel really excited.
Yebo, that's a great word.
It's a great word, I agree.
There's just so much joy in that word.
Yeah, I know. It is brilliant. It feels like a grasshopper hopping up, saying, yebo, here we go.
How about the level of English in this country, though, for the how much it's spoken and how well it's spoken?
It's very Anglophilic. Lisbon definitely is extremely Anglophilic. And when you talk about the level of English, see, it's a very nuanced question to ask. So generally, I suspect the answer to the question would be, oh, do you have a B1, B2, C1, C2 certification in a language? But I think, especially in Latin countries, when you say, what is the level of English of a native Portuguese person, it's not a question that actually can be posed in one line. What you have to ask is, can this man communicate to you using neologisms derived from Portuguese and English, what he wants to say. And most of the time, the answer is yes. You see, because English has a lot of words which come from Latin. So I frequently find when I talk to my Portuguese friends that when a very complex concept is being talked about, and maybe they are struggling for the word in English, they finally blurt it out in Portuguese, and it basically is the English word.
Yeah.
Literally. I mean, it's a very beautiful, grandiose sounding, gilded, exquisite Portuguese root for the English word, but it's basically the same thing. I've also begun to notice, since you asked about the level of English, that my English has now changed from using mostly Saxon words, Anglo words, to using Latin-based words. I have gone from saying things like clarify to saying things like elucidate. And my own English has changed, partly because of the conversations I've been having.
Actually, that makes sense now, because sometimes it's easier to use a more complicated English word.
Yeah.
Because it makes sense in Latin.
Exactly.
And so it'll make more sense to the Portuguese.
Yeah, in a Portuguese context, because they already have the Latin root for that thing. So when you say, right, what is the level of English? I think in terms of communication, it is extremely, extremely magnificent. It's brilliant.
Amazing. Okay, but how Portugal? How did that start? How did you end up here?
Right. So when I was in Germany, I met a very good friend of mine. Well, a man who would become a good friend of mine, Gabriel Cardoso, who was a professor here at Technical. And we started working, and then he invited me to visit Portugal. This was about maybe 10 years ago, a decade ago, I think. And so I came here, I landed here, and the moment I landed, there was this moment when I think it was a summer day. It was a really hot summer day. And you look at the blue skies and you see the sea there. And on the way, on the plane, I was reading about the earthquake, the great earthquake, where there was a tsunami, and then there was water and there was fire. It was quite hilarious in lots of ways. And then I look at this place, and it felt completely like I could just stay here for the rest of my life without meeting a single person. I mean, literally, I could just feel it in the air. Then I walked around, and one of the first things I noticed was I think I walked to Praça do Comércio. I didn't know it was Praça do Comércio at that point. And I saw the faces of people. And one of the things that you find in Lisbon, when you look at the face of people, is there is no imposition. So there are certain cultures where people have a rigor about their faces, their rigor about their body. There are certain cultures where they have a flamboyant openness, like in Italy, for example, Sicily, for example. Here, there is this beautiful, majestic, opulent openness, but it is not flamboyant. It's just a natural state of being. It is so unindicated. It's beautifully done. You feel the sense that I can walk up to someone and I open my mouth. There is no hesitation there on the other side saying, oh, he's going to open his mouth. He's a stranger. What is the protocol I should use? But there is also none of the defense mechanisms of flamboyance saying, oh, hello, stranger, welcome to our country. No, he just treats you like a human being and says, he's going to open his mouth. That is interesting. We'll see how this goes. Speaking to lots of Portuguese people is almost like doing improvisation. There is no hang-up in most cases. And then I discovered Fernando Pessoa. As in, I discovered his various heteronyms. And then, of course, I went to South Africa because I wanted to see how life was on the dark edge of things. I went up to Cape Town, and there was this lovely moment when I saw the cross that had been planted by Bartholomew Dias when he was crossing the Cape of Good Hope. And then I said, well, I've seen the first one. I've seen the starting cross on the voyage. And I said, good, I need to go back. And so I decided I would just go back, basically. So it felt like, when I landed here 5 years ago, it felt like coming back, in a manner of speaking. That's why.
Amazing. What you mentioned, you feel like home. What are those things that make you feel like home? Yeah.
So sunlight, lots of sunlight, but not pure sunlight. Sunlight with a lot of cirrus clouds, partly because we are near the river here and the sea. The cloud formations are magnificent. I think with clouds. I am fascinated with clouds, basically. I'm essentially a cloud chaser. So most of my friends are are essentially spammed every single day with pictures of blue skies and clouds all the time. I have memories of writing papers. I have memories of writing play scripts with certain clouds that were there on the day that I thought of this particular line or thought of this particular solution. It's how my memories are formed. Lisbon has some of the best skies around. Not
Skies?
because, yeah, best skies. It's not just the skyline, or it's not just the fact that it's a blue sky. It is the cirrus cloud formations here that are absolutely beautiful. See, before Lisbon, the one city where I love the skies was Madrid, because Madrid has a lot of pollution. And because it has a lot of pollution, the sunsets are glorious because of the dust in the air. But Lisbon beats it. It's not polluted, but it still beats it completely. You can feel this copper cavalcade of lava in the evening. That makes me feel at home, believe it or not, actually. The other thing that makes me feel at home, of course, is the fact that I understand, I enjoy the Portuguese attitude towards sweets. They do not think of sweets as luxuries. They do not think of sweets as extras. Sweets are the thing you got to have to eat, more or less. So the first time when I came here 10 years ago, when I went down to the hotel, I was staying in Ars Lisboa, near Almada, and then I go down for my breakfast. And I was amazed by the amount of sweets around because I kept looking for the main course, so to say. Then I realized, oh no, this is the main course. And I went around and told everybody, did you know how many sweets they have in this place? They said, yeah, that's breakfast. Well, that was it. Sweets and skies. Period.
All right, let's talk about the sweets. By sweets, you're talking cakes and pastries and things, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
For example, my favorite one is the umbaba.
The what?
The umbaba. I'm almost certainly pronouncing it wrong. Umbaba is basically this orange. It's cream, and it's got this orange crusty base on top. It feels very much like it looks very much like a little version of Trump. If you look at Trump from a drone, there's an orange top, and then there's something white below.
But certainly tastier.
Much tastier, much tastier. In fact, when Trump won the election, I basically went out and had an umbaba, basically, and sent it to all my friends saying, not everything orange is bad, just to make a point. But yeah, umbaba is basically what I eat. Then there is, of course, a powdered douche at the end of the day. What I really enjoy, on the other hand, is I don't enjoy the pastas de nata. I'm not particularly certain.
It's very controversial. It's very controversial.
Yes, I know. On the other hand, I don't have to make a running for it. I don't have to stand in line near Belay, just through a long line of tourists just to get that place. Most of the stuff I enjoy are the stuff that local people enjoy, which I don't have to stand in line for. So generally, I enjoy anything with sugar icing on it, which is almost everything in this place. So
yeah,
I don't even know.
Well.
Yeah, I don't even know the names of dishes. I just walk in there and I say, Esther, and that's what it is.
Amazing. What about the rest of the food? What else? What else do you like in terms besides the sweets? Do you like the food?
Well, interesting question because I'm a vegetarian. So,
yeah,
if it were not for the sweets, I might be probably starving. Okay. So compared to Spain, I suspect compared to cities in Spain, I think Lisbon has still a little way to go in terms of, shall we say, having vegetarian, vegan food. There is a lot of Nepalese and Indian places. Of course, there is a lot of vegetarian, vegan food. Okay, I can eat out perfectly happily. But unlike in Spain, where I think what they've done is they have now got vegetarian paellas. They have got tapas, which has vegetarian, dishes, which does not look like an afterthought. They've actually put in some ingenuity into it to really weave it in, so to say. That's not quite happened here yet. I'm not complaining. It's just a statement of fact. Presumably, it'll happen eventually. So what I now enjoy is the Portuguese pizza. I have gotten accustomed to it, I think. The Portuguese pizza. So South African pizza, for example, has beautiful, scandalous things like putting in pineapples and olives on the same, literally on the same slice. It even has bananas, actually, if you go to Rosebank in Johannesburg. Well, here things are not as scandalous. I've not seen yet a banana anywhere. But I enjoy how they put in the cebolas. They put in the caramelized cebolas beautifully.
Caramelized onion.
Yes, it is fantastic. It is crispy, crunchy, melts. It's like a little small erotic chant in your mouth when I eat it. So now I'm looking for it. So every time now I go out of Lisbon, and I dig into a pizza, I'm almost expecting that caramelized cebolla to be there, and then of course I say, oh no, that's right, I have to go home and I just get it done. See, that's one of the other things I think that makes me feel at home.
Yeah, we had good pizza when we met that time in Lisbon.
Yes, exactly. That's literally what I call the classic Portuguese pizza. It's nourishing. It's got all kinds of things. I can't really make out essentially what is the difference between that and any other vegetarian pizza. But whatever it is, it leaves you with this very satisfied feeling, like a good conversation.
Suresh, I mean, let's talk about more living here, because you're a guy that does. I mean, it's, normally when you say to somebody, "What do you do?" It's a very quick answer. Yours is not. It's like, what don't you do? And maybe that's a shorter, but I mean, Lisbon's a great place for that, because that's kind of a very much a Portuguese thing, is that actually in Portugal, they have a word for it called polyvalent. It means I do a little bit of everything. I mean, do you find that you kind of your uniqueness, that it's just kind of, you mentioned that there's no pretense with people, you just fit?
So I think one of the best ways to think about Lisbon is it is essentially Paris, but with a lot more individual agency. So if you go into Paris in your 20s, there's a heady swirl, this delirious swirl of things you can do. You can get sucked up into the whirlpool, and you'll enjoy it. You'll be in with the bohemian crowd, and you'll make stuff, and you'll do wonderful things. And maybe someday you'll wake up when you're 40 and say, wait, what am I actually doing? Lisbon doesn't go like that. You come in here when you're in your 30s, and everything is gentle. Even the waves dream gently in this place. And then you say, oh, here is what I want to do. You wake up in the morning and I say, I want to set up a theater company in the English language, an English language theater. Now, clearly that does not, so you tell your friends who have not thought about this at all, and you say, I want to set up a theater company in English language, and there's a bunch of actors, they say, great, let's do that. And then within about three or 4 months, there you are. Because people have actually gone out of their way to help you do this. There are lots of ins and outs that you have to follow, in which you don't even know that answer the question. There are people who have made phone calls in Portuguese for me to various places, just completely voluntarily and without me even asking. They just volunteer to do it at the end of the day. So it's that lack of pretense is also something else. Generally, most of the things I do involve telling stories. They may be telling stories about black holes, they may be telling stories about people, they may be telling stories about things, or exploring puzzles, or confounding people with paradoxes, which is very wonderful, actually. And I think what is wonderful about Portugal is if I meet a Portuguese artist, a creative person who does something completely different, it is, completely different things, and I tell him, here is what I feel excited about. In loads of places, a very tolerant person would be regarded as a person who would say, oh, I see. Okay, that's your thing. That's what makes your mojo go. Good for you. And then you'll have a coffee and you'll walk away. And I've noticed this consistently about Portuguese creatives. You tell them this is what I want to do. You tell them I want to do Shakespeare in this way. They'll say, that's really interesting, but I want to know what fascinates you about this, because they really want to see what gets you going. They want to share your drive. You can feel this amazing curiosity, not about the story that you're telling them, but about what about the story fascinates you, because that's what they're going to take away. It's this very beautiful notion of saudade. You have a longing for something, which is why you make a story, which is why you do stuff. And when you talk to a normal Portuguese creative, they want to share your longing, because the longing really attracts them. They're saying, this is your longing. I'm happy to take on this longing and make it mine, which is exactly what I think this country does. Which
it's
is
interesting.
Why. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's interesting, because I've always loved the curiosity of the Portuguese. I mean, my wife is Portuguese, and so I see it kind of at firsthand. Is she has this built-in curiosity, which I kind of envy, because I don't have that built-in curiosity. I have to foster it. I have to grow it. I have to try. I have to work at it, and I find that quite often in Portugal. And then, I think that, I don't know if it's empathy, but they take on your position in a way that a lot of people don't. That's fascinating. I never thought about it that way as well.
Yeah, it's not. It goes beyond tolerance. It literally goes beyond saying, I am happy to exchange pronouns and take what you think of as your longings and your emotional spectrum and think of it as part of my story too. That is a level of openness that's almost unprecedented in all things I've done. It's brilliant. It's fantastic.
Yeah, well, now that we're on that, I mean, what else do you want to say about Portuguese people? You've kind of experienced Portuguese people at all different kind of spectrums. We're talking in the street, just as in meeting people. You're working with Portuguese people. You're studying Portuguese people. You're directing Portuguese people as well in some of with your plays and things like that. What do you want to say about this group of people in general? I know we don't want to generalize, but we kind of have to.
So there's a very controversial thing about the age of discoveries, right? That is forms part of the mythic meta narrative of Portuguese, where you say, "Oh, look, we're this country that went out for the first time. We went out of Europe and we discovered new lands and new places, and essentially explored. We essentially were the front runners, the advertisement for Western civilization out there everywhere else." Now, this is of course very controversial because it clearly glosses over all the colonial overtones and so on and so forth. But something at one of the web summits that I think was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, the last year before the last web summit before the pandemic, struck me. I think the person who opened it said something along the lines of, "Well, we've always been explorers. We've always gone out and met people and connected cultures. And now we may not be essentially have those galleons and those ships, but we bring people back in here." And I think one of the things that I think Portuguese people function on is they function on the stories of people. So there are people, they don't look for flair in you. They don't look for what particularly makes you tick or how useful you are to them. They simply ask themselves, if they meet you today and they have a conversation with you, does that conversation make them more aware of other kinds of human conditions? And then they feel very happy if that happens, which is part of this culture here. You find people just sitting around over a beaker the whole day talking. And to somebody from a Protestant culture, this might feel like an atrocious waste of breath and time because it's not useful. It's not generating wealth, right? In some sense of the term. But that's not what happens. What they're trying to do is something beautiful. When you talk to a person, you probably want information, or you probably want to be entertained by humor, or you probably just want to kill time while waiting for something else to happen, like the food to come, so to say. And I've always found consistently across the spectrum that most conversations with Portuguese people, you can sense their satisfaction when they have actually made a discovery. Some discovery, you tell them a little story about, I don't know, you were at this particular place and you had a small interaction with somebody, and this is how that person felt after the interaction you did. It's a small thing, something small deviant. Maybe you didn't have change at a pasteleria, and then everybody goes around, scrubbing for change. It's a simple story. You just tell it to a friend saying, "Sorry, I'm late because we didn't have change," and everybody had to go around figuring out if somebody had change. And there is a curiosity about it, because that person is then going to ask you, "Oh, really? And how many people helped you? How long did they wait?" He is really, really curious about the fact that there was a human state here where everybody decided they had to fixate on this artificial rule that you had, which says you had to have exact change. And this is independent of whether you're running late or not. I've had a conversation like this with a friend when we were both running late. We were both running literally uphill. And he's still asking, "Oh, now that's interesting. How long did that happen?" While you're running uphill. And that is very Portuguese. Not just the sense of curiosity, but the notion of what you value as part of a conversation. What you value as part of a conversation is simply the notion that the other person has expanded your sense of the human spectrum. It's very abstract. It looks very poetic. But the funny thing is they make it work.
Well, I'm going to flip something. Now that you say that, because I mean, I've got obviously the Anglo-Saxon background coming from South Africa, where kind of everything happens in its time, and you've got this hour to do that, and you've got that hour to do that, and then having interaction with people from the UK, people from America, it's a similar kind of mindset. And the narrative is that we waste a lot of time in Portugal because we have these conversations. But actually, now what you've been saying, I kind of want to flip that over and go, it's actually hard work to create that time. You know, it's hard work to when you are stressed, when you are in a rush, to still stop and say, hey, I'm going to have a conversation with this person. I want to understand part of their story. I want to understand how the people around them, the people that are important and the things that are important to them are doing. This is something uniquely Portuguese and something incredibly beautiful that unless you kind of get it, it just seems like it's people wasting time.
Yes, in fact, I've also begun to realize this is kind of correlated, and of course I'm generalizing, but this is kind of slightly correlated to the famous Portuguese punctuality. Because generally when you say you're going to be punctual, what you mean is you have a deadline. You're meeting someone at so-and-so hour, and then you say, okay, good, I need to catch a metro or I need to drive, and this is the amount of time I need to, you slot a little bit of amount of time. But the funny thing is, that sense of anticipation of that meeting is a forward-looking one, while this particular attitude that we've just been talking about, the sense of being interested in the here and the now, in the human story that's happening right now to you, that is the almost complete antithesis of it. So most times when people come late for a meeting, okay, and now it's perfectly fine, you know when a person is going to come late for a meeting. But most times when people come late for a meeting, there may be an apology. Formally, they might apologize to you or not. It doesn't matter. But if you ask them, oh, were you late? Yeah, no, I wasn't doing anything special. There was no roadblock or something. I just finished that other meeting late because we ended up talking about something, and that was it. But there's no guilt. There's no guilt. There's just a simple statement. It's almost like someone saying, hey, I was having food and I really enjoyed the food, and I just decided to enjoy the food a lot more. And I think it's brilliant. It works fantastically, because once they've done that, they come to you and then they say, okay, good. Now I'm not going to anticipate any other meetings I have in 20 minutes time. I'm just going to totally suck this meeting for what it's worth. And it's brilliant. It is absolutely wonderful. So now, speaking of punctualities, I think the Portuguese definition of punctuality is a very functional one. It works. So when people say, in fact, even for official meetings now, you say, look, we're going to meet at 8 for 8:30. It was such a beautiful line. The first time I heard this invitation for an official meeting, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. What does that even mean then? And then you say, oh, because you're spiritually going to tell people to come at 8 o'clock, so they spiritually start preparing for it. If they do that, they might turn up at 8:30. But it works. It works like a charm. I think,
Yeah, well, I mean, look, one of the things that I try to explain to people is you might have a guy that will be late for your meeting, but when he's at your meeting, he's going to be fully present.
That's right.
And that's something that doesn't exist in the world today. You could have a half an hour meeting with a CEO in another country, and he'll be there on time, but he's already thinking about the next meeting. You don't have him 100%. He's probably getting interrupted by messages and his secretary walking in and out. Whereas you get a guy, even if he's 15 or 20 minutes late, you know that you're going to get him completely in Portugal, and that's something that I appreciate a lot. I talk to people a lot about, even you could be dealing with a guy that's incredibly successful or runs a multi-million-dollar euro company, but he's going to be completely present. You're going to have him. You're going to have his undivided attention, and and there's that humanness factor in Portugal, which I think is again so pure, which you don't get everywhere else.
Yeah, because he treats you differently from the way he treats his phone. You're both giving him information, but you're human. You see, and there is a difference there. Saying, "Oh, you're human. That's great. Human to human is great. I'm just going to enjoy this conversation for now, and then that's it." And once the conversation is over, he says, "Oh, now I have to run." And then, he kind of scrap, which is brilliant. I really enjoyed that one. It also gives me the facility to be much more flexible in my scheduling, which really helps.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you take. There's almost they apologize for being late, but there's no guilt. I love that part of it, and it's because they haven't actually done anything wrong, and they're going to give you the undivided attention, which kind of makes up for it.
Yes, exactly. In this case, I think the general idea is, you may have expectations of how a certain thing or a certain deliverable is about to be achieved. It'll get achieved, not necessarily the way you think it's going to be achieved. And that's all. And I think one of the great things about working in this system is you realize, oh, I have a protocol. I say, if I commit to this deadline, I work every day regularly, finish a part of the work till I'm done the deadline. Other people have other ways of doing it. They do nothing else, and then on the last day, they just do a lot of stuff. And there is this openness to this multifarious ways of getting the same result, which is amazing, which is absolutely brilliant. And it also has got to do with the fact that they understand human beings are different strokes. So long as there is mutual satisfaction on both sides, the ends in this case literally justify how you get there, the means, which is a wonderful way of working.
Yeah. How has Portugal changed you as a person?
What an expansive question. So I think one of the things that has happened is it has changed the way I feel. So my natural emotional temperature tends to be high. I don't mean that I have anger issues or something. I just feel strongly about things, and I'm very expansive and expressive about things. And I think what happens here is there is a certain languor now in the way I actually express myself occasionally. It has to probably do with the beach, I have to say. But if you go to a beach on a sunny day and you find that you can't really talk in a manner in a high stakes manner about anything. You may feel very strongly about things, but the feeling will be, tinged with some kind of afternoon languor, so to say. And I think now what's happened is that I take my own sweet time letting an emotion percolate instead of just letting it explode. And that's partly because of the way my Portuguese friends process emotional information, because they let it go around in swirls, let it sink around. A week later, they'll come back to it, and then they'll have more conversations about it till every shade of the canvas has been explored. On every small thing you can think of, it has changed the way I write plays. It's really interesting. So my writing, I write in English, and when I came here, my sentences used to be, shall we say, slightly American, not in terms of linguistics, but in terms of the quippiness of it. It used to be short and sharp. My dialogues used to be short and sharp. Now my dialogues have a very Latin, labyrinthine, serpentine quality to it. I can notice it in myself because I'm still writing in the same language, English specifically, but I can see the same characters, and I work with, now I have lots of close friends who are also frequent actors, regular actors I work with. And I can see that the dialogues I'm giving them to write and the way they're emoting is different. That's partly because I have seen, when you do theater, people express emotions. That's how they process it. And I write a sentence in English language because I'm probably thinking of somebody from a different culture saying this line in my head when I write it. Then I give it to a Portuguese actress, and she comes out with something completely different, which makes internal sense. And then I feed that, and the memory of this, the accumulated memory of all these experiences now makes me change my line so that whatever sentence I'm writing actually works even better for the Portuguese actress I'm writing it for. It has changed the way I literally process information. It's gentled it. It's not less expansive or more expansive. It is just takes its own sweet time evolving, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah, I find that my reaction time has changed since being here. Like like you said, I have Portuguese people around me who I'm jealous of how they process things. Like you said, I love that they let it swirl, and it's exactly, you can actually almost physically, you can actually see it happening in their mind.
It goes round and round, calmly and quietly, like a little tub.
I don't let it swirl enough. And that's something that has changed, I think. I would still like to let it swirl a bit more.
Yeah, retrospectively, I think that was the first thing that I felt when I came here 10 years ago. I would not have been able to put a finger on it at that point of time. But it was that moment when I suddenly realized there is so much inner life here, because there's a lot of inner life going on at every given point of time, with multiple conversations happening in their heads. And it's gentle. It's not like a violent, high stakes, bang, bang conversation. It's just gentle. And then you're going to go for it. It's changed the way I do drama. So now I don't necessarily go for conflicts. I just go in for the low stakes, normal stuff and just explore it. It's changed my emotional temperature of my dramatic pieces, actually. It's very interesting.
It's puts a different meaning on the word space and time.
Well, that is true. Absolutely. Completely and totally. Space is more expansive. time essentially is very subjective. It's more subjective here than in any other place. It's like Galadriel's garden. Because I think one of the things I realized is when I came here first, I was very conscious of the fact that, at least for the first year, that the conversations would end. A lot of conversations would end when you say goodbye, with me having the last word. I would say quit, something, and then walk off. And I always kept on wondering, so you give a quip, either somebody laughs out loud or somebody makes a reaction, because that's the point of a quip, essentially. And something wonderful would happen here. I would look at their eyes, they receive the information I'm giving them. They would just absorb it. Because to me, the notion that when you're saying goodbye to someone, so you've had a lovely conversation with somebody and then you're saying goodbye. So you say something which is definitive, which puts a kind of a stop on that conversation. It's like a definitive thing. It's not a definitive thing. When they say "Atija," they literally mean that. They, it's like au revoir. They don't actually want to say goodbye. They're like, right, fine, I'll just take it. They don't put a definite full stop on a conversation and go off.
Yeah, like we're going to come back to this. We'll come back to Atija.
And they're processing it and just kind of go off. And it's like, so now I do that now. I mean, even in my phone conversations with people now, I don't try to basically take it to a dramatic ending where I've got beginning, I've got a lovely intense moment, and then I'm like, okay, here we go, goodbye, and then I kind of go off. No, I just kind of slide off now. Mm-hmm. It's really interesting because now that the pandemic is over, I traveled to Germany, and I met some German friends, and I realized exactly how much I'd changed. Because most cultures have that particular, three-step process. You meet, and there's a moment of intense conversation, then things slide down, and then you put a full stop and go off. Yeah. And I just slid off. And I was like, oh, this is so amazing. You guys are so dramatic. And here I'm all just surfboarding out here. It was wonderful. And then I come back to Portugal and realize, oh, that's what has happened. I have gone totally loose cannon.
Yeah, and it's phenomenal how they use that ateja. Ateja for people listening means until now. It means see you soon. But it's such a broad thing, and we use it when we're on the phone. We use it when we're in face-to-face conversation, in a text. Ateja. I mean, and it's almost like like this isn't over. We'll this to be continued.
Yeah. It literally is like, we're getting back to this in a moment. Literally. And I think the word "ja" is wonderful because it's the first word that I encountered maximally when in the process of trying to do something about the theater company, because there were a series of, it's bureaucratic, right? So there's a series of documentation, and then there's a series of more documentation. And then you ask them, have you got all the documentation? Ja, almost there. It's almost there. It's almost there. And then, of course, I said, you know what? We should just name the company Ja. It's perfect. It works in every single. That's why the theater is called Ja International Theater. It was
great name. Great name. Suresh, I mean, for people that are thinking, I want to spend more time in Portugal, thinking of moving, maybe not necessarily Lisbon, but anyway, because I mean, it's a diverse country as well. What are some of the things that you want people to know about Portugal, besides what we've already spoken about?
Right. So I can talk about Lisbon, obviously. Although Isidro Queiroz would say there is Lisbon, and then there is the rest of Portugal. But so in Lisbon, well, on a practical note, clearly. There's a little, if you are basically coming from outside the EU, for example, maybe you want to think about documentation because the legalization documents needed to basically settle down and so on and so forth might take a little while. They might take a little while, and it is not just the fact that the bureaucracy is slow, it is slow everywhere and every other place, but you might have to be a little patient and realize that the rules are not, that some of the rules are unwritten. Let me explain. So if you go into a place, any place, and you say, okay, here's a bunch of rules, and you don't have a document because where you come from, this document does not exist. Now, generally what happens is you just say, look, this is ridiculous. This document does not exist. It's a very stern thing to say. That is probably the wrong attitude to take. What you tell them is, well, I don't have this document. Can you tell me what it is that you would like instead of this document? Because there's always an alternative. It's not there in the rule, clearly. They understand, because the funny thing about all Portuguese bureaucratic systems, include for all kinds of real systems, for all kinds of adult business, is the rules are sub-optimized. The people understand this. The bureaucrat sitting on the other side understands that the rules are optimized. So don't go and tell them your rules are stupid, because he knows that. Just tell him, here's my problem. I'm willing to be flexible here, and I'm willing to try doing something else. Could you tell me if there is something else you would accept? This is not there in any rule book. And bureaucrats are not supposed to be flexible. It's not an Egyptian bazaar, but it is. And what they'll do is they'll kind of go out of their way to essentially extend a deadline, totally unofficially, and then finally manage to give it to you. But you have to have that sense of patience, and also the notion that this is a one-on-one thingy. The bureaucrat is actually looking at you and giving you a flexible option.
Well, it comes back to explain your story. I remember I had an issue where I needed to provide a document and it didn't exist. It doesn't exist in South Africa. And I had to explain.
I had the same problem. Yes.
I just said, look, I'm from South Africa. This document that you're asking for doesn't exist. What do we do? And we found a solution. So that's the cool thing, is that, you've got that human, again, it comes back to your story and the humanness side of things. This is going to be a tough question for a guy, a string theorist and a director and writer and a professor and a psychologist. Suresh, one thing that you want people to remember from our conversation and take away from our conversation. One thing.
That you can definitely ask a tough question. But let me see. On a serious note, the one thing you want to take away from this conversation is, okay, if you've ever felt lonely in Portugal, and if you ever felt that you were a little lost, maybe all you need to do in this country, literally, is to go off to the beach and just listen to the people on the beach talking to each other. And you'll find something very beautiful. You'll find essentially that you will fall in love with life again, because actually falling in love with life is about being interested in the stories that life can bring you. Something that Portugal teaches you. That's a very expansive answer.
Beautiful. I love that. I'll give it a try one day.
Oh, good. Excellent.
Suresh, how can people follow you? Is there a place that people can follow you and stay in touch with your work and follow you online?
Oh, yes, of course. So, absolutely. So my theatre company is called JA International Theatre. It has
So that's J-A, JA.
J-A, that's right. It has a website, jait.pt, JA International Theatre. So jait.pt. We are on Facebook, of course, as JA Theatre. We're on Instagram as JA Theatre. And we are followable everywhere else, essentially. And I'm the contact person, so you can just send me a mail. We are at the moment exploring doing something else after the pandemic. So we decided that JA should do something slightly more bold and go out of its comfort zones. So we're doing a performance in June, first week, at a place called Prisma, where queer performers are going to actually narrate their own stories and trying to basically introduce you to what it feels like to be them, essentially. So it'll be all over the place, so to say, and people are most welcome to come and watch it.
Definitely. Okay, so we'll put some links in the show notes so that people can follow and stay in touch and come and see some of your shows. That'll be great. Suresh, a question that we ask all of our guests: Portugal, the simple life. Why?
Because given enough time, anything complicated does become simple, and the Portuguese give you enough time for it.
It's the longest pause that I've ever had after asking that question, but beautiful answer. I love that. Yeah, makes perfect sense. Suresh, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you. This has been delightful. It's a great way to start a Monday morning, actually.
Wonderful. And I'm going to let you call it.
And that's a wrap.
So thank you once again to Suresh, and thank you to all of you for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and please leave a comment or a review. We'd love to hear from you. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode. And as we say in Portugal, Teja, welcome to the simple life.